Brendan Dassey trial transcripts, day 7, continuing on page 72, cross-examination of Brendan Dassey by Attorney Fallon. How do you feel about this today, right now? That I just want to go home? That's all you feel right now? You just want to go home? And scared? Do you feel sorry for Teresa? Well, I know everybody feels sorry for losing someone. What do you feel? I feel sorry for them. Why? Why? Because I know how it feels to lose someone that you love. And you're telling us today that you had nothing to do with the death of Teresa Halbach? No. Why did you tell the officers that you did? I don't know. And is it just a coincidence that you had all the details about how she died? I don't know. Do you recognize this exhibit 170? Yes. This is the rake that your Uncle Stephen used to tend the fire that night, isn't it? I can't remember. You can't remember? No. How about this shovel? Exhibit 171? Yes. He used this shovel that night, right? Well, I know he used a shovel and a rake, but I don't know that they're it. How did you know that Teresa was handcuffed to the bed? I don't know. You just made that up? Yes. You've never told a lie before that got you into so much trouble, have you? No. Attorney Fallon, that's all. The court. Redirect? Redirect examination by Attorney Freeman. Brendan, you had been asked by Attorney Fallon about the jeans, and specifically asked about how bleach got on them, correct? Yes. You said you might have wiped your hands on them? Yeah. Do you recall wiping your hands on them? I think I did. When did you notice that they were dirty with bleach? When I got home. That same night? Yes. Mr. Fallon played a portion of the video for you to watch and asked you some questions. Do you recall that? Yes. And he questioned you about how you had answered the questions to the 2 officers, correct? Yes. Had you said the same thing before that to the officers? Attorney Fallon. Objection, vague. Attorney Freeman. That's fine. What did you say to the officers prior to about those same topics, prior to that clip that he just showed you? I don't understand. Okay. Attorney Fallon showed you a clip of you telling the officers about being there and seeing Teresa Halbach and participating and killing her and sexually assaulting her, correct? Yes. You watched that or saw it or heard it? Yes. Were you asked those same questions at any other time during that interview? During that interview? During that interviews with the officers? Before the taping? Were you asked any questions like that before that clip on the video? Yes. Were your answers the same? No. Why did you have different answers before that? Because I was making it up. What were you making up? The details in that. Before or during the clip that Mr. Fallon showed, what was the part that you made up? Well, the stuff that didn't really happen is the stuff that I made up. And what stuff didn't really happen? Where I was over there before 5, where I helped and kill her and rape her and that? Why should this jury believe you today? Because I didn't really do it. On the video clip, again, I'm talking about the one Mr. Fallon showed you? Yes. The longer one? Yeah. It's about 15 minutes long. You heard the questions that were asked of you by the officers? Yes. When the officer would tell you that it wasn't your fault, how did that make you feel when you're answering the questions? Attorney Fallon. Objection, beyond the scope. Attorney Freeman. It was on the video. The court. It was overruled. You may answer. The witness. Can you repeat the question? When the officers would tell you this is not your fault, how did that question or how did that comment in the question make you feel? That I wouldn't be taken away from my family and put in jail? No matter what you said? Yeah. Attorney Freeman. I have nothing else, Judge. The court. Any recross? Attorney Fallon. No, thank you. The court. All right, you may step down. We'll take a break until about 1:45. Recess had at 10:24 a.m., reconvened at 10:56 a.m. Jury in. The court. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, this is part of the defense's case. The defense has subpoenaed a witness, but the witness is not going to be available until 1:30 this afternoon. Is that correct? Attorney Freeman. He's apparently leaving the crime lab shortly. Should be here by 1:30. The court. You're finding out that scheduling witnesses is certainly not a science in the case, and I'm not even sure it's an art, but in any event, that's what occurred, or that's what's occurring at this stage. And he will be your only witness this afternoon? Attorney Freeman. This afternoon. The next witness we have would take about, we're guessing somewhere between 5.5 hours. The court. Tomorrow. Attorney Freeman. We'll begin first thing tomorrow morning, correct? The court. All right. So with that said, we're going to adjourn until 1:30 this afternoon. Thank you. Recess had at 10:58 a.m. Reconvened at 1:44 p.m. Jury in. The court. Mr. Freeman. Attorney Freeman. Judge, at this time we would call Mike Riddle. The court. Right up here, sir. Just remain standing. The clerk. Please raise your right hand. Michael Riddle, called as a witness herein, having been first duly sworn, was examined and testified as follows. The clerk. Please be seated. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record. The witness. Michael Riddle, R-I-D-D-L-E. Direct examination by Attorney Freeman. Mr. Riddle, what is your current employer? I'm a latent print examiner with the State Crime Lab in Madison. Why don't you pull the microphone just a little bit closer to you? And how long have you been working in that capacity? Be 15 years in August. What generally are your duties and responsibilities as a fingerprint analyst for the crime lab? We receive evidence from local sheriff and police departments to process for presence of latent finger or palm prints. If we do get prints on an item and they're compared to standard fingerprint or palm print cards in attempt to make an identification. You've testified as an expert in fingerprint analysis in prior cases in the state of Wisconsin? Yes, I have. Attorney Freeman. I believe at this time, Judge, the state has no objection to qualifying this individual as an expert in this field. The court. Is that correct? Attorney Gahn. That's correct, Your Honor. The court. All right. It's stipulated then. Attorney Freeman. We'll avoid a number of other questions that way. By Attorney Freeman. I see you have a file with you. Is that the file in regards to this investigation? Yes, it is. If you need to refer to that while you're testifying, if you can just indicate that you need to do so before you do. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Can you briefly explain why analyzing fingerprints is an important investigative tool? Because of the uniqueness and individualness of fingers, no two fingerprints are alike on any person or persons. So if we are able to find a latent print on an item, it does indicate that that item was touched at some point in time by that particular individual to the exclusion of all others. Is this an exact science? Yes, it is. Can you briefly describe what it is that you're looking for as a fingerprint analyst when you're doing a fingerprint analysis in regards to, say, comparing a known fingerprint to an unknown fingerprint? Well, the first thing I do is if you can see a pattern type. There's only 3 basic patterns on fingerprints, and it's a whorl or a loop or an arch. Looking at the standard, if I see that a person has all loops, which is fairly common, and the latent fingerprint I have is a whorl, then I don't have to look any further. I can automatically exclude that print. If I do get 2 pattern types that are the same, then I look for individual characteristics within that pattern area in order to make an identification. What ways do you as let's say a crime tech individual who may be lifting prints, and you can describe what that means, but what ways are there available to you or those persons extracting or developing a fingerprint for purposes of comparison? Can you describe the ways that you go about to do that? There's several different ways, and usually it depends upon the nature of the surface as to what method of development we use to bring out a fingerprint. A latent print is also called a hidden print, which means it's invisible and has to be brought out or developed by the use of powders or chemicals. If we have a real nice smooth surface, such as a piece of glass, then we can just use regular fingerprint powders, develop the print that way, and we can photograph it and preserve it. And we either do or do not lift it. It depends. If we have it captured with a photograph, there really isn't necessary to go any farther. But many times we'll put some lifting tape, which is like a clear plastic tape, and we'll rub it on top of the print, pick it up, and put it on a backer. If we're using a white powder, we'll can put it on a black backer so that we can see the contrast. And if we're using a darker powder, then we'll put it on a white or a clear backer so we can see it. Other items that are more porous, such as paper, cardboard, we have to use chemicals in order to develop those prints. There's one particular chemical we use called ninhydrin, and it reacts to the amino acids in the fingerprints. So when we processed that, either brush it on or spray it on, it'll develop into kind of a purple fingerprint, brings out all the ridge detail. There's also super glue, which we use on semi-porous items. Put it in a tank where there's super glue fumes, and the fumes will adhere to the fatty acids in the fingerprint. After that's accomplished, we can either powder it and lift it, or we can enhance it further by the use of dye stains and look at it under a laser. Now, you were referring to latent prints. Yes, for the most part, that's correct. There are other types of prints, correct? For instance, visible prints. There's visible prints known as patent prints, and there's also ink impressions we got from our fingerprint standards, like a fingerprint card. What are plastic prints? Have you heard that term before? Yes, it's either a plastic or a molded impression, and these are impressions that might be left in clay, putty. Oftentimes, if a burglar tries to get in through a window that's puttied, we can find molded prints inside there. If someone leaves a print in dust, for instance, would that be able to be lifted under some of what you discussed in regards to latent prints, or is that more appropriate to be somehow preserved as like a plastic print? Well, in a dust print, we don't get a whole lot of those, because what normally happens, if a surface is real dusty and the hand or finger touches that dusty item, it lifts the dust away, and it may leave an impression looking like a finger was there, but there usually is no ridge detail at all. So there's not much we can do with it. We can try super gluing it and see if we can develop ridge detail, but on dusty surfaces, it usually doesn't work very well. Is it possible to use digital photograph of a print, whether it be visible or plastic, for instance, to be able to preserve the print without actually physically touching the print? Yes, it's possible. We use standard 3x5 format film, not digital, to capture our prints, although we do get many prints in from other agencies that they've used digital camera to take them. For instance, the FBI, I think, has developed a methodology and for that technology for extracting prints using digital photographs. Is that correct? That's correct. Now, in this case, you were called in at some point to assist in the investigation, the Halbach case? Yes, I was. And well, how would it occur? Did the lead investigators contact you and ask you to look at items that may have either visible or latent prints? Well, when the vehicle was located and brought to the lab, that's where I started my involvement in it. And we don't get a lot of vehicles in there, but when we do get them in the identification section, we'd sort of rotate, and happened to be up at that time. That's how I got that vehicle. 1 second, you mentioned the vehicle. Is this the vehicle you're referring to? Yes, it is. And when you for instance, examined the vehicle for possible prints, is that correct? That's correct. Did you view the vehicle once it was at the crime lab, or did you actually physically come to the crime scene to view the vehicle where it was found? All my work was done strictly at the crime lab. So you weren't involved in the field operations of this investigation? No, I was not. So now at the crime lab, you observed this vehicle. Did you observe any visible prints when you examined the vehicle? Yes, I did. And were you able to somehow preserve those prints? The prints were powdered and developed that way, and then they were photographed. I looked at the photographs and determined that they were of value for identification. Then I attempted to lift them. However, for some reason or another, they did not lift real well off the vehicle. But you did first photograph the print before attempting the lift? That's correct. Okay, so you were able to also do your own observation of the photograph and compare to, let's say, for instance, a known sample.